Canada sends arms and money to Ukraine. Canada will send weapons to Ukraine and provide it with a new loan of 500 million Canadian dollars, 347 million euros, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trento announced on Monday. At the same time, MPs and the country's economic elite in Ukraine have already escaped abroad. This action is the first time Ottawa has announced that it is sending deadly military equipment and ammunition to Ukraine. The items to be delivered to Kyiv are worth $7.8 million, said Justin Trento. The purpose of this support for Canada and our other partners is to prevent Russia from continuing its offensive against Ukraine, the Canadian Prime Minister told a news conference, which was primarily devoted to the crisis against health measures to prevent the spread of the new coronavirus pandemic, which has been rocking the North American country for more than 2 weeks. Authors comment: I have seen demonstrations and protests for compulsory vaccination in many countries, but I have not seen a march to give justice to those responsible for it for 2 years. By the end of January, Canada had already lent $120 million to the Ukrainian government to support the country's economy. At the same time, in Canada, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trento has invoked emergency powers in a bid to quell protests against mandatory vaccinations against COVID-19 that continue to dominate the state capital, angering some provincial leaders. Trento vowed in a press conference Monday that the use of powers under the emergency law gives the federal government broad capabilities, including the ability to ban public gatherings and travel. Will be time-limited, geographically targeted, and reasonable and proportionate to the threats they are intended to address. Trento also said that the army would not be deployed. Without a court order, banks will be able to freeze the personal accounts of anyone linked to the protests, he added. Local law enforcement agencies have acted to maintain peace within their jurisdiction. Despite their best efforts, it is now clear that there are serious challenges to the ability of law enforcement agencies to enforce the law effectively. For her part, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland said Canadian banks and other financial service providers could immediately freeze or suspend accounts without a court order if they were used to fund blockades of protests. He also warned companies that authorities would freeze their corporate accounts and stop insurance if their trucks were used in demonstrations. In recent weeks, protests have been raging across Canada from Ottawa to Ambassador Bridge, which connects Windsor, Ontario, to Detroit, Michigan, and another border crossing at Coutts, Alberta, putting pressure on Trento. A weekly blockade of the Windsor-Detroit Bridge affected the entire automotive industry, forcing General Motors, Ford, and Toyota to cut production last week due to a shortage of spare parts. The blockade was lifted on Sunday, February 13, 2022. It is worth noting that the law on emergency measures has never been used. The War Measures Act's previous version was applied only once in peacetime by Trento's father, Pierre Elliott Trento, to quell a violent uprising by Quebec separatists in 1970. Leaders of some Canadian provinces disagreed with Trento's plan by teleconference with the Prime Minister earlier Monday. Please pray for world peace. If you like the video, and want to contribute financially to my effort, you could make a small contribution by clicking on the link below.